Welcome to the third episode of Inclusion Nugget series. I'm your host, Harsh, and I'm a project lead at Reeling Consulting. We are a research-based DEI consulting firm. We boast a global network of experts and tailor-make interventions best suited for your organization. We have observed that these days, many organizations begin their DEI initiatives with some of the most visible dimensions of diversity at the workplace, such as gender. And because of that, it lacks a depth in the understanding of the DEI gaps. These initiatives, though, act as a quick fix, but what they fail to do is they fail to look at things in a more holistic manner in developing inclusive workplaces. To understand the need of diagnostics, I have invited Lynda. She is one of our Reeling subject matter expert to discuss the importance of creating DEI metrics and diagnostics within the organizations. Lynda's expertise in organizational diagnostics, cultural audits, developing communication tools, training, and strategic planning have been leveraged by organizations across the globe. She is the current chairperson of Center for Global Inclusion. Welcome, Lynda.
Thank you, Harsh. Nice to be with you.
Likewise. So, Lynda, would you like to share something about that, the importance of diagnostics in, when developing DEI interventions?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things around diagnostics is that it enables a strategic versus a transactional approach. One of the things we hear often in the field of doing diversity work is people take a tick box approach. And they're doing a bunch of actions individually without linking them all one to another. I really do believe that if we take a diagnostic approach, that it enables, as opposed to incremental change, it enables transformational change. And it takes me back when I think about the reasons for this. We go back to our grammar classes, the how, what, why, when, and where. So why are we doing this? Is there internal pressure? Is there external pressure? If we're going to do it, are we committed to doing it? Are we prepared to commit the human and the financial resources to it? So we need to understand the why and what the commitment of the organization is to it. The how, what's the process going to be? Are we going to look internally? Are we going to look externally to our clients, whatever our client base might be? When are we going to do it? Are we going to look at a change time frame is usually 3 to 5 years. So it's not something that we're going to implement all of a sudden and get it done quickly. The what is our processes. What are the processes that we're going to use? And that's the diagnostic and we're looking at what's going on and the planning and the implementation pieces. And then where are we going to do it? Are we going to do it in a specific area of our business? Are we going to do it across the whole business? Are there going to be things that are non-negotiable for the organization overall, and maybe negotiable or customized within different businesses or functions or regions? So that's some of the overarching kind of piece for this.
These are great insights, Lynda, and it does indeed help the DEI leads to realign themselves to organization needs to do the basics of grammars, like you said, and to look at it from those perspectives. So what are some of the parameters you measure when conducting a diagnostic, and how do you do it?
Okay, good question. Qualitative and quantitative, you need both. You really need both. The quantitative is the representation in an organization and what particularly of the groups that we might be wanting to influence and do things in a better way for specific groups. That means that you look internally. You also want to look at the labor market statistics. What are the skills in the labor market by the groups that you're wanting to support within your organization or within your client base? Then also internally, you want to look at things like hires, promotions, and terminations. Many organizations don't have that data, but if you can do some of that data collection by the groups that you're trying to support, that gives you really an idea of where there are disparities, where there are adverse impacts, as we often speak to these kinds of things. The other piece of this is once we look at all of the numbers, is also looking at the qualitative aspects of what's going on in an organization. And that's really If you're looking internally, and that's where most organizations will focus and certainly start out, looking internally, you want to look at the policies to see if there are policies there that create equitable opportunities, and then look at the policies as well for where they may have an adverse impact on the groups that you're trying to support. And you also then want to look at the practices and see how people either experience or observe those policies in practice, or the lack of policies that may be there to support. So when you think about some of those policies and practices and the things you would want to look at, how do you recruit people to an organization? Are people developed and promoted equitably in an organization? And what are the supports that are put in place? Who gets access to training? Is it tracked so that you know that everybody's getting equitable access to training? Work family life policies, are they policies that will support women and men in organizations? Because certainly today we see, no matter where in the world, we see men taking a greater role in the family lives as well. If you want to look at external, you might be looking at how do you develop new products and services, and who do you have at the table as you're looking at developing those products and services. If you're going to look at a marketing initiative with a new organization or with a new sector of the market that you might not have targeted before. One example that I recall from my internal experience, and where I was a global DEI lead in a multinational, was we started marketing mortgages to the LGBTQ market. But one of the things that is very systemic when you look at that is, have you prepared your people who are doing the mortgage work to ensure that they're sensitized to a new market, and that they know the right, that they have the right understanding of how they operate within a market that they haven't worked in before, possibly. So there's that piece. But then you want to also follow through and see, am I getting a return on that investment? You know, if I'm doing a marketing campaign to a group that I haven't marketed before, what's my return? Are we getting the return on the bottom line of the business? So it's really systemic in how you look at that. And it's the internal and the external pieces on that.
These are, these are brilliant points, Lynda. And one of the things which I actually wanted to ask you, you said that, you know, at times there are policies which adversely impact the diversity groups. So could you please give us some of the examples of that kind?
One of the things is, if you have your training and development, you know, who gets access to training? And do you have specific programs? You know, our policies sometimes say everybody's going to get access to training, but how is it that we have those discussions? You know, frequently, if a performance appraisal is done once a year or sometimes twice a year, and an appraisal or a discussion, because we know many more organizations are moving away from appraisals. But how do you ensure that everybody has the option of getting access to training? And what is the discussion that's had? And how are we ensuring that the policies don't just work for certain people, but that they work for others as well? You know, work family life policies, you know, if we're going to be a little flexible on those kinds of things, do men get the same access as women? We can say in many cases that the policies support both, but we know that predominantly the family responsibilities fall to women. But how do we then start tracking the behaviors? It's the behaviors and the attitudes that we're changing over time. So what we're requiring with a lot of this work is a change in behaviors. And over time, and it takes time for the attitudes to shift and catch up to the behavioral change. But the thing that is an advantage when you do this work is, in our workplace, we can require a change in behaviors in how people are going to operate within our organizations. They may do different things outside the organization with their families or with others, but over time, they're going to start shifting as well. And those attitudes over, sometimes it's a 5, 10-year, sometimes longer period of time, but the attitudes catch up. And that starts changing society.
That's, I feel myself catching again and again saying that, oh, that's a brilliant input, Lynda, but these are brilliant inputs, Lynda. So my next question to you is, Lynda, another thing which I want to ask you is that I know that Center for Global Inclusion has developed a tool which can help an organization measure their inclusion progress over the years. Would you like to share a little bit about that?
Absolutely, Harsh, and thanks. Thank you for the question. As you know, I'm board chair of the center, and the center has developed the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Benchmarks. And it's a very comprehensive document that can be a little overwhelming when people first look at it. You have to be able to take small bites. It covers internal, external, foundational work, and bridging work in 4 groups. And there are 15 categories that represent any of the things that we would anticipate seeing attention paid to in good diversity work. It's got 5 levels of achievement, which are from doing nothing to best practice. And it really is a good guide to help you see what best practice work looks like. And this has been developed with 112 expert panelists from around the globe. So it really is a comprehensive piece. And it will work for whatever your groups are in any environment. It's all transferable. And this is one of the reasons that it was so important that we had people from around the globe help us with the development. So it really is a way to help you create strategy as to where you want to achieve and to measure your progress over time as you look at, am I looking right now at maybe I'm at progress level 3, and what's it going to take for me to get to progress level 4 or to get to the best practice? So it's being used across all sectors around the globe, and it's building. People around the globe are stepping up and saying, hey, it's a great tool. One of the things I would say is you need a depth of diversity understanding, probably to be able to support and use it in an organization. And I'm a believer of bringing in external resources as you need them, both if you need it to help you with something like the benchmarks, and also when I spoke previously about the qualitative collection of information, whether you're doing focus groups or surveys or individual interviews, sometimes the confidentiality requirements that your workforce need to understand to participate really do mean that it's better to be placed outside. And that was absolutely my experience when I was an internal. We worked with external resources to ensure confidentiality. And it's one of the things that I do in my consulting practice is bringing that confidentiality because I'm working from outside the organization. And what you would expect is that when you take information back to an organization or you look at the depth, people are going to say, that's what we're reading and this is our reality. So where do we go from here?
Great. So after we have conducted diagnostics, the logical step would be to create an intervention. So how does, once the intervention has happened, how does one check for the effectiveness of it? And when does one conduct inclusion audits post-intervention?
Good question. Good question. And I suggested earlier that change work is usually done on a 3 to 5 year time frame. Absolutely, you have to look at your plan that you've created, and it should be looked at. Some organizations look at progress quarterly, some semi-annually, some annually. You should be looking at what you've accomplished each year according to your plan, at a minimum each year. And one of the things that I encourage people to do is as they go back and look at the pieces of the plan that they feel that they've accomplished, to also look at their plan and where they've accomplished something, does it also relate to other areas of the plan so that they really can start see the systemic pieces coming together. And one of the pieces that I often think about is if you have really good work-family life programs, or if you're known for an inclusive workplace, then you're going to find that that helps your recruitment.
Yeah.
And it'll also help your market segment, because people know you to be an organization that's a leading organization, and so they want to do business with you as well, whatever that business is. You know?
Yeah.
So it's very systemic, and as much as we create plans that have the themes around, you know, maybe it's work, family life, maybe it's recruitment, maybe it's how we market our products and services, one piece often supports 2 or 3 of the themes within our plans. And I think that's really something that I've done for clients since I've been consulting on my own, is taken their plan at the end of the year and integrated those pieces so that they could see that one action is possibly touching 2 or 3 other aspects of the plan. So looking at the plan on a frequent basis, looking at the accountabilities and how the organization is holding people accountable at all levels. And that should be anybody that has an impact on carrying forward actions of the plan. And then I guess too, you can't do another diagnostic too quickly. You have to give an organization time to look at what they've accomplished and start seeing things like engagement surveys possibly shifting, or pulse surveys that organizations might do to see how things are beginning to change and people's perceptions are changing. You might do it internally, you might do it with market segments as well. So I would say that probably you want to wait for about a 3-year period before you start doing any kind of more in-depth diagnostic again. But you're still going to be looking at it on a basis of surveys and what employees and your clientele, your marketplace is beginning to say about the organization, because you will see shifts in that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's brilliant. While yes, I understand that a lot of these things are easily implementable for an organization which is already quite advanced in a DEI space. What advice would you give to an organization which is just starting their DEI journey?
If it gives me a chance to dream about the best case scenario, and there are many organizations, there are many organizations that do the best case scenario. So I really go back to, if you don't take stock of what you've got, how can you make a really good plan to carry yourselves forward? To me, it's a little bit like taking a shot in the dark. You know, if we're in the dark and we're shooting for a target, we don't know whether we're going to hit the target or not. Yeah. And this is the same kind of thing. If we don't know, if we don't have the lights on, if we haven't looked at what people have to say, and I'm a huge believer in stories. You know, when I talk about the qualitative work and doing diagnostics and asking people how they observe or experience policies and practices in action, those stories are powerful, powerful thresholds for change, because it's one of my experiences from the top of the house to the bottom of a house in any organization really creates the impetus for change. So I'm a firm believer in people's stories and getting the qualitative as well as the quantitative pieces. So take stock. Here, look at what your numbers are telling you, look at what people are telling you in the organization, and if you decide to do the external segment as well. Look at the recommendations that you would make coming out of that to create change in an organization for the people in it, or change for your marketplace if you're doing the external piece as well. Create from that an implementation plan. And your plan is going to look at the kinds of things that need to be implemented on that. As I suggested a 3 to 5 year time frame. Create milestones within that plan. Within the plan, you're also going to want to look at what are the things that are going to be organization-wide, and I call those non-negotiables. And one of the simple examples of that is we will not discriminate. Doesn't matter where you are in the organization, if you're in a small branch office somewhere, if you're a multinational, at every level, we stand for no discrimination in the workplace. That's a non-negotiable. But then when you start, if you're a multinational or if you have regional variations, then you're going to look at some things that make sense in one environment and not in another. So you start customizing that implementation plan, still with all the accountabilities in place. You really do need to hold people accountable. And then as you've looked at that plan, you start then doing the reviews of how you're progressing with it. And is it quarterly? Is it semi-annually? Is it annually? And have you held the people accountable for this, who have an influence on how the organization is going to move or change and implement all of the actions that's going to create truly an inclusive environment for everybody in the organization?
That's a great advice, Lynda. Before I let you go, I have one last question for you. This is something which I have observed in my working, which is that many a times what happens is that when you're working with an organization which is just starting off their DEI journey, so their feedback points are usually either their immediate peer groups or their supervisors. But it's a very inverted pyramid approach kind of a thing, where all the feedback's coming from the top, but we really don't know what's happening at the ground level. And because of that, the initiatives also get created slightly skewed. So how does one convince, as a consultant or as a DEI lead, to the organization that we need to conduct these diagnostics and we need to understand what's happening on the ground level?
Good question. Some of that is the diagnostic. When I talk about asking people about their experiences and observations, you have to do that across all levels of an organization and have the diversity of the organization represented. If you don't do that, you're absolutely going to get skewed information. The commitment needs to come from the top down, and the top needs to continue to learn so that they're enhancing their own ability to make the significant commitment for the organization, to speak about it in communications internally and externally, and to show up as somebody who is committed across all levels of the organization. And the other thing I think that you can use to help you with that in some cases is diversity committees or employee resource groups, the affinity groups, or whatever they might be called in an organization. They can help bring some of that communication from all levels of the organization. Whenever I've been involved with committees and ERGs, we'll call them, the resource groups, it really is a two-way communication vehicle. They can take information that they're hearing about what's happening in the organization at various levels out to people in the organization. They're also a mechanism to bring back those communications and what's happening. And when you strike those groups, they're not for individuals to bring their issues. Those groups need to be aligned with the goals of the organization, but clearly able to bring things that are working well or not working well. And again, I want to go back to the qualitative piece. That's not just hearing what's not working. It's hearing what's working well and building on successes, as well as looking at the challenges. I think the other thing is, you know, we often look to people in organizations at all levels. When we're doing job fairs, often we have people who've been recruited in the last 2 or 3 years to support job fairs. What's the representation of your teams that go into universities when they're doing job fairs? You know, that again is across levels of an organization. And do you support people to work in community organizations? Most organizations today that are doing good diversity work and good corporate social responsibility work are encouraging employees to be involved in communities. Are we looking at the diversity of the communities that we're in to ensure that people at all levels are able to support some of the goals of those kinds of organizations as well? So it's a good question, Harsh, because it really is not about the top leading this and the DEI people in an organization doing it. The DEI people are the consulting function to the business of the organization to implement this across an organization. But there are learning and many, many other opportunities at every level of the organization for people to create a different kind of organization for us going forward.
Great. Thank you so much for taking out the time, Lynda. Until next time, guys. I'm sorry, I need to correct myself. Until next time, I'll see you soon.